Are almost there. All right, we're ready.
Okay. Do you want to? I'll just say a couple of words, and then you check and make sure that it's actually recording.
Okay. Yeah, it's
So there we
recording.
go. It's recording.
It is
Okay.
recording.
All right. We're picking up where we left off last month, and notebook number 21, page number 172. I am never going to forget this now because this is the one that goes on forever. To recap for people who missed the original explanation, this was coming up on Reed's and Dave Sim autobiographical, which of course was a big centerpiece of Reed's, fictionalized as Victor Davis, but also segueing into Dave Sim. So this was really my first. Okay, how did Dave Sim come to be Dave Sim? What were the critical life moments that established who Dave Sim was? And this is what this page is made up of. I skipped one last time because when I was looking at that one, I was going, man, I don't know if I can even explain that. Like, this is just a shorthand note to myself. So, not having had much warning last month that I would be asked to discuss this, I thought, well, let's give it another month and see if it gets any easier to explain. And guess what? No, it doesn't. But at least I've had a month to wrestle with it. So it's basically Christmas present, cardboard boxes. Dad hits me. Mom takes his side. What happened was my father worked in New Hamburg at a place called On Brass. And On Brass had this antique filing cabinet in the basement. As I recall, it was in the basement, just sort of, it's there. And at some point, my dad said, I'd be interested in that. Can I, work out? I forget whether it was just, oh yeah, we never use it. It's an antique. We have modern filing cabinets now. So if you want to just take it away, take it away. Or if my dad said, I'll give you $50 for it, or $25 for it, or whatever. Anyway, it got straightened out. Yes, they did let him take the antique filing cabinet, which consisted of two levels of three filing cabinet drawers, all in wood. Like I say, it was an antique, but definitely a filing cabinet, sort of, the handle that you pull out, and the door of the drawer is the full size, and then inside it's half size, just like modern filing cabinets, but a precursor of it. And then there was also a top layer that was flat files, 2 rows of flat files. And I would guess maybe like 8 or 9 of these flat files on each side, and the same height as the filing cabinet drawers. And on top of that, a finished wood top with a sheet of plate glass on top of it. So this arrived at the house. I'm pretty sure my dad had to get somebody to give him help with it. Like it wasn't going to fit in the car that he had at the time. So it was brought downstairs, and there was like the antique bottom piece, which was the legs, and then the file drawer on top of that, file drawer on top of that, the flat files on top of that, the ornate top with the sheet of plate glass. I don't know if you're all still with me, but if you're all still with me. Anyway, so that was put in the basement, in the section of the basement where I had my comic books. And I basically put comic books in it. The file drawers were, you couldn't stack up too many comic books in them. You couldn't stack them up to the top of the file drawer front, but you could stack them up as high as the half size that filing cabinets have. I put smaller collections of comics in it because, like I say, I couldn't put all of my action comics in there because I probably had 100, 150 of those, and it would just be too tall. To understand where this is going, you have to remember that this was pre-backing board. We had plastic bags through Robert Bell that actually fit comic books, but they were pretty expensive, like $3 for 100. So you'd only put your best comic books in those. The rest of the time, we just used baggies, plastic roll bags, and put the comic book in it, fold the plastic bag over the back, and tape it on the back. And that's what most of us used for our comic books because that was a lot cheaper than buying Robert Bell's plastic bags. So most of my comic book collection was not bagged in the sense that we know now, and not even bagged in the sense that we knew then. They were just loose comic books. But these file drawers worked pretty good for that. For the Golden Age books that I had that didn't fit in any collection, I had like Captain Marvel Adventures number 62, Marvel Mystery number 31. Obviously, those are the only ones that I had of those. Marvel Family number 22. Excuse me. So that worked. That worked okay. That was really good, and it was actually a very nice thing to put comic books in. I don't remember my father ever taking an interest in comic books. Like I would show him an old comic book if I got in Marvel Mystery number 31. I would show it to him because it was sort of his time period, but not really his time period. And of course, I found out later on that there was the embargo on comic books in the 1940s over World War II. So, although my father remembered having Human Torch comics, Captain America, Superman, Batman, whatever else, he could only have had those up until 1939, 1940, when they were embargoed. So there was a bit of a disconnect there of, okay, my dad's remembering something that he's not actually remembering. That he would have been 10 years old when the embargo happened. So whatever he remembered of Superman and Batman and stuff like that was pretty much just 1938, 1939. So at some point, there was this Christmas present where my dad bought cardboard file file boxes, which were, I would guess, a foot and a half by a foot and a half file drawer, and then in a cardboard sleeve. And he bought like 6 of these, and the idea was that I would put my comic books in those. And it was like, well, that's not really going to work. I mean, they're 3 feet deep, which made it look as if I could put my entire comic book collection in there, but that would require putting them in sideways and spine up and interior pages down. And like I say, most of my collection wasn't in plastic bags. So it's like already having learned, comic book condition when it comes to comic books is important. That was something that I didn't know, but it was something that I was learning in the early 1970s. It's like, no, I can't stack them sideways because that'll damage the comic books. And it was weird having this conversation with my dad because, like I say, he sort of had this grudging acceptance of his son being interested in comic books, which links to a weird conversation that I remember having with my mother at some point about my father's antipathy towards comic books, and her saying something along the lines of, well, imagine if you were interested in green glass bottles. And it's like, to this day, I really don't understand what sort of point she was making. It's like, what my response was, and I don't know how eloquent I was on the subject, was, well, I would think if I had a son and he was interested in green glass bottles, I would have some level of interest in green glass bottles because he's my son. Even if I had to fake the interest, it's like you, as parents, and I'm sitting here going, why am I having to explain this to my mother? As parents, aren't you sort of obligated to have some sort of interest in your children's interests? So that's kind of a digression away from it. But anyway, so I'm having this weird conversation with my dad about, like he's thinking he's meeting me more than halfway by actually going out and buying me a Christmas present that will house my comic books. And it was, well, okay, this is why that's not going to work. I mean, I know, you don't follow any of this, and we've never conversed about this because you don't want to converse with your son about comic books. But condition is very important, and if I stack them sideways, that's going to damage the condition. And this put him into a kind of fine rage of, he's meeting me more than halfway, buying me a Christmas present to house my comic books, which later I picked up on the fact that he wanted the comic books out of this antique file cabinet that he wanted to use for something else, not for comic books, sort of thing. Which, if he had explained that to me, I could have said, well, okay, yeah, I'll be happy to have a replacement of this, but these 3 foot deep, foot and a half by foot and a half file drawers, cardboard file drawers, are not going to work because I'll just be able to put like one small stack in the front of them, and then as soon as I pull it open, it's made out of cardboard. The whole thing still tilts forward and it's going to spill out. The more I tried to explain why this wasn't going to work, the more he was taking it as, I'm not appreciating this Christmas present that he's buying for me for my comic books, and I'm telling him that he doesn't understand things about comic books that makes this not a good or workable Christmas present. And he was getting far more worked up than I was aware of, and was like, he had this wad of comic books in his hand that he was using to demonstrate how I was going to put them into these cardboard file drawers, stacked sideways. And it's like he was like crushing them in his hand. And at the same time that I'm explaining to him about how condition in comic books is important, so I said to him, could you not like crush the comic books like that? And he just took the wad of comic books and smashed me upside the head multiple times. Like I have to say, I am an advocate of corporal punishment. One upside the head from your dad. I got that not frequently, but that was the signal that you had gone too far in some direction, and whatever it is that you were doing, you would stop doing. And I'm a big advocate of that. But like I say, this was like hitting me multiple times until I dropped to the floor, at which point he kicked me. And it was like, okay, this was just way, way, way over the edge. And that was pretty much it for me and my parents. It was like, my mother was there, I guess, supposed to be participating in this, in quotation marks, discussion, and definitely gave me a withering look as my father stalked off and she stalked off, which I understood. It was the look that said, you've upset your father. And it's like, we don't do that. You don't upset your father under any circumstances, because I have to live with that. And anytime my sister and my mother and I could be having a screaming argument at 5 o'clock at night after school, and as soon as you heard the car pulling up in the driveway, mutual agreement, everybody stops arguing, everybody just calms down, everything is fine, because you don't want to upset your father. So the reason that that's on the list is that was a break point for me, where I went, not only do I not love these people, I don't really even like these people, my father and my mother. I've been pretending that I do, and trying to have the appearance of a dutiful, loving son. But at that point I was going, why am I doing that? Why am I pretending to feel something that I don't feel? The only thing that I was interested in remotely at 282 West Mount Road East, former 282 Philfinger Road in Kitchener, Ontario, was that section of the basement, 1/4 of the basement, that had my comic books and the comic books in them. The comic books were good. The comic books I was interested in. The comic books I dearly loved. Everything else was just, well, I have to keep my comic books somewhere. I mean, I was fully aware of the fact that, if my parents were in a car accident and both of them were killed, and whoever I would end up living with, probably either my Uncle Cliff and Aunt Veronica or my Uncle Vic and Aunt Marilyn. My only concern was, where are my comic books going to go? I will be happy to go and live anywhere as long as I have room for my comic books. Anybody who doesn't have room for my comic books, I don't want to live there. So it was a real break point in terms of I stopped pretending. I stopped pretending that I love these people that I didn't love. It's like I will portray being a responsible child, and I was a responsible child. I didn't cause my parents any great amount of grief, as a lot of children were doing who were in high school in late 1960s, early 1970s. But that was just portrayal. It was the clock is ticking, and as soon as I'm out of here, that's going to be it for me and these people. And that's really how my life was after that. It was once I had moved out, there was an expectation that I would have dinner with them. And it was, okay, how infrequently can I have dinner with you? And worked out to about a month. I would get a phone call after about 3 weeks or so. Oh, we haven't seen you for a long time. We got to have dinner. Oh, okay, we'll do that. But there was no circumstance where I ever went, gosh, I can't wait to see my parents. So that's one of those. I'm sure there are many people who have the experience that I did, but unfortunately for people like us, it's a very, very difficult world where people just go, well, of course everyone loves their parents. It's like, no, I didn't hate my parents. I didn't love my parents, and I didn't like my parents. I just had absolutely no response to them. I finally broke with them in 2003 and went, that's it. I'm just not doing this anymore. You people have a happy life, but I just can't do this anymore. And they both died within a few months of each other in 2006. And my aunt phoned me to say, your mother died. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you for phoning and telling me that. And then a few months later, your father's dead. Okay, thanks for telling me that. Had absolutely no reaction, zero reaction at all. I mean, I have memories of them. My dad, I quote my dad a lot because he had a real memory for funny lines. And but they weren't his funny lines. It was just he would hear a funny line somewhere from other guys, and he would never forget it. And they're good funny lines, so I always use them.
Right.
So that's that story. Do you have any questions? Me having gone all that distance.
Well, one of my thoughts when you were telling the story, when you were saying that, if your parents had died, your biggest concern would be, what happens to my comic books, was the either Richard George or Harrison Starkey line of, it speaks of a obsession that borders on the pathological. And I'm going, well, yeah, that sounds about right. I have...
Yeah.
When I was a kid growing up, my dad subscribed to Amazing Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, and Star Wars for my brother and I, because Marvel was doing subscribe to 2, get 1 free. And for a year, we got comics in the mail. And so we had a stack of 36 comics, and we kept them in a shoebox because, you're a little kid, and it's, these are important to me. I want to make sure that they're around. You're not just going to leave them sprawled all over the room. When you're done reading them, you put them back in the shoebox. And, So it's like one of those, I could totally see if my dad had said, "Hey, I got this nice file cabinet. You guys can, my brother and I, if we took it over, and he said, "Hey, I want it back," it would have been, "Well, what are we gonna do?" And if he said, "Well, here, try this," it'd be, "Well, that's not gonna work, Dad, because of exactly what you said." And I could see that my dad probably would have been a little more understanding, but at the same time, I think there would have been "It's my file cabinet, get your crap out of it."
Right, right.
I mean.
Which go ahead, finish.
Well,
finish
it's one of those. I mean, it's like my dad was in the Navy and he had a bunch of blue work shirts that were they're not uniform shirts, but it was what he would wear when he was on the sub. And
right.
when I was in high school, I found them and I was wearing them, but I'm broader shouldered than my dad was, and so like I'm wearing one day and the elbow ripped and I'm like, oh, I'm a dead man. And somebody's like, why? I'm like, well, this is my dad's shirt, and he doesn't know I'm wearing it because he's in California and I'm in Wisconsin. But, it's like, I got to find a way of fixing this type thing. And he never asked about it. And he there was only one shirt that he liked, and that one he got and went, oh, it's ripped. And I'm like, yeah, I did that, sorry. And he kind of gave me a look, but at the same time, it was one of those, okay, there's nothing we can do about it now. But, like... Right. But, it's one of those, every kid goes, oh, yeah, my parents' things are my things until they discover that, no, your parents' things are your parents' things.
Right. Like there's ancillary parts of the story. My Uncle Vic, who was, the golden child of the family, my dad's older brother, was visiting, which he did very infrequently. And I don't think my dad ever figured out the fact that his older brother didn't like him very much, mostly because my dad had a very condescending attitude towards my Aunt Marilyn. I mean, she marched to a different drummer, but he definitely condescended to her, and my Uncle Vic, I think, definitely thought, well, Marilyn's twice the person you are, 3 times the person you are. Don't condescend to her, but also knew, again, you don't cross my father. Anyway, one of these infrequent visits from Uncle Vic, the subject of my comic books came up, and my Uncle Vic said, can I see your comic book collection? Again, like the way an uncle would be. I don't see my nephew very often. This is what he's interested in. Can I see them? And it's like, yeah, okay. And brought him downstairs and, pulled open the filing cabinet and each of the file drawers. I remember showing him, Captain Marvel number 62 and Marvel Family number 22. And then, having given him the grand tour for however long that took, probably 20 minutes or half an hour, we come back upstairs and he goes, well, that's amazing. And my dad goes, yeah, isn't it? And it's like, what do you mean, isn't it? You don't think it's amazing. You think it's deplorable. But because Vic thinks it's amazing, you'll pretend that you think it's amazing in front of Vic. It's like, I can't deal with you. I have no idea how things roll around in your head. But man, oh man, there's just no meeting place with you. Like I tried to figure him out, in a number of different ways. His own father died when he was like 7, so he really had no background in having a father. He had a stepfather, my grandpa Davis, who was my grandmother's second husband. But that's a very different thing. Like how you deal with a stepfather is very different from how you deal with a father. So there you go. That was like half an hour trying to explain barely more than a line in this notebook.
Yeah, but Margaret's gonna appreciate it. She's gonna listen to this in her car on her way to work, going, "You're kidding me." You're kidding me.
Well, this is the thing. I think if we have Notebook 21, page 172, and somebody transcribes everything that Dave Sim had to say about this one page in his notebooks, it would be like, let's hope that this is the only notebook page in that category, so we never, never, never have to do this again. And having said that, now I have to go on to the next one, which was the pedophilia, 1969, 1970, 1971.
We kind of covered that last time.
Yeah, we got most of that done, but as always happens to me with my long-winded, laborious explanation, just when I get to the point of it, that's it, I'm done. I've laid all of the groundwork. So, recapping, and we can maybe just have a link so that people can go back and hear all of the lead into this. The impact of it was I've written on the page Stephen Dick, Craig Dawson, legal obligation was the point. That Stephen Dick, having had these two girls that he was babysitting, say, our dad has a really big penis. How big is your penis? And him just being like embarrassed, but finding this really, really funny and just changed the subject. And me going, that sounds like it might be something other than just something that's funny and a little bit embarrassing. There's possible legal culpability here. Also, I just backed off and went, well, what am I going to do about this? Like, I can't really say to Stephen, you should probably report this. Like, who would you report it to? His parents are nice Baptist people. They're not apt to be wanting to have this conversation even with Stephen, let alone with the neighbor, let alone with the police. And so I backed off, even though I went, there's probably a legal obligation here on my part just because he told me this. But I seem to have talked myself into not doing anything about it. So maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Maybe I'm doing the right thing. I don't really know. This was why when the situation came up with Craig Dawson, almost immediately afterward, and I have this confused thing of, I can picture Stephen Dick in 1969 when I was in grade 9, and I can picture Craig Dawson in 1971 when I would have been 15, having the conversation that we had about him having sex with someone older than him, so a woman past the age of majority. So I got this like weird disconnect of going, could I have had that conversation with Craig Dawson when he was 13 or 14? Because again, the legal obligation entered into it of going, he can't legally have sex with a woman who's past her age of majority. And my primary reaction was, again, jealousy. It was, why can't I find, a housewife or a school teacher or whoever it was who will have sex with me? And thinking, well, are these two different things? The situation that Stephen Dick was in because it's little girls, and the situation that Craig Dawson was in because it was an older woman and he was an underage boy. Is that still pedophilic molestation? And it's like, at the time I was going, no, that's just a little girl thing. If it's a little boy, it's like, lucky little boy. A woman decided to have sex with you. Now we know, of course, that that isn't the case, and usually we find out that it's a school teacher who had sex with one of her male students that she got the hots for. And yes, if she's convicted of that, then she goes to jail because it is statutory rape. An underage boy can't give permission any more than an underage girl can. And you're not supposed to have sex with a student because of the authority situation, position of authority. So it had a real impact on me that the Craig Dawson situation happened just after the Stephen Dick situation. And I went, okay, it would be reasonably easy to look up Dawson in the Kitchener phone directory and look at, okay, how many Dawsons are on a street that feeds into Forest Heights Collegiate, and phone and say, you know, can I speak to Mr. Dawson? Speak to Mr. Dawson and say, I don't want to tell you who I am because I think Craig would beat crap out of me for telling you this, but he told me that he had sex with a woman past her age of majority, and I think, you know, you probably have to look into that, and then hang up on the assumption, again, that there's no way that the call could be traced. But then thinking about that, it was like, okay, I'm throwing a hand grenade into somebody else's environment, assuming that his dad takes a dim view of this and wants Craig to explain it, and Craig doesn't know who said this. Then Craig's in the nutcracker of having to identify whoever the woman was, and then is her life being ruined? And at what point is there a real legal obligation there? And this sort of links up with the reason that this was so important to me was because it was, okay, in both those instances, I didn't do anything. And legally, in terms of if you hear about a crime, you're supposed to, or a potential crime, you're supposed to report it. Not having done that, what's my personal legal culpability? And in all of my experiences since then, it's been guys always have to make those choices with other guys. That guys tell other guys about things that they did that are illegal, and it's like, well, okay, that's up to you. That's got nothing to do with me. Which again, technically it does. If somebody tells you about a crime, then you're supposed to identify it. And again, I just couldn't get my brain wrapped around the fact that there could be anything wrong with having sex when you were a 13 or 14-year-old boy if you could find a woman willing to have sex with you. But then a Cerebus fan, years and years and years later, told me that he was in that situation where he got seduced by an older woman when he was 13 or 14 years old, and said that it was an extremely traumatic event in his life, and he still isn't over it, and he never will be over it. And I thought, okay, I have trouble picturing that, but I also realize that fornication and adultery, carnal knowledge, are, to the extent that they just look like entertainment, usually pack a much bigger metaphysical wallop than that. And that's what I'm not recognizing, was it wouldn't just be a matter of, 20 minutes of having sex with this woman. There's all kinds of implications that go into that you're not aware of. When you do it, you will find out exactly how bad the repercussions are, but you won't find out unless you do it. And not being religious at the time, it was just, no, I'm not really getting this. Even though it's illegal, I hope that some woman will do this illegal thing with me, because I don't want to die a virgin. It's like there's a number of years in the male life, in the teenage years, where you're thinking, I really don't want to die a virgin. And I'm not seeing any potential of me ever getting laid at any point in the future. So there you go on that one. I'm hoping that this will, at long last, bring an end to Notebook 21, page 172.
Hope springs eternal, right?
It's got to with that. It's got to.